I'm watching you, Oda. You almost had me there. For the longest time, you told us this is the Gomu Gomu no Mi, a fruit that gives the user the properties of rubber, makes them uh, negate electrical damage, allows them to resist physical damage, blunt damage, mind you, and then you try to throw this curveball at us. But I'm watching you. You said this now is the sun god Nika, a god of liberation, a god of the sun. But I'm not falling for this for a second. These powers all scream something way out there, something crazier than a sun god's, something that's not anything we've ever seen in this world of the One Piece. This is the god. This is not the Hito no Mi model Nika. This is the Hito no Mi model, the mask. Now, that's odd also because I'm watching more. You said this was a sun god. The mask is associated with Loki. That Loki? Or I don't know, maybe this Loki. But that's a night god, I've been told. So now I'm not sure about anything anymore. My brain is just like falling apart trying to think about what this really means for us. So don't think you're gonna fool me with this nonsense about that we know what we're looking at, that we're finally at the end of your little charade, of your little where you're leading us. It's little breadcrumbs. You're pulling us this way and that way. I'll keep my eye on this the whole way. Alright, being silly aside, I mentioned this briefly in my chapter review of One Piece 1045 about Luffy's powers being like the mask. The mask, and when I refer to this, I'm talking about the 1994 film with Jim Carrey, and I know there's a comic related to it, but I'll be focusing today on the mask because so much of what Luffy has done in this last 2 chapters, this screams the powers of the mask, and that whether or not, that just tells me that Oda could have seen this directly, being inspired for this, and I want to point out some of those today, and some of the pros and cons I see of this. And many of the pros we've already seen, but there's a few cons that I want to really cite, and I'm a little bit worried about Luffy's with this. But to start with the premise, to give us a little background, I wanted to go over the mask, and that's what that movie's about, and just for anyone who hasn't seen it yet. And so we have a film here with Stanley Ipkiss, a bank clerk in a metropolitan city who's the underdog of this film. He's very hapless, he's hopeless romantic, and he's kind of used and abused by most people around him, with the exception of his friend. And at one point in this film, he comes in contact with a wooden mask, very unassuming object that just looks like a prop. And this thing, when he puts this on, this gives him a pretty much godly amount of superpowers that anyone who watches this will right away see the similarities to what Luffy has been doing. And this mask, in the respect of Stanley Ipkiss, starts letting him remove all kinds of inhibitions, allows him to be the confident kind of person he wants to be, that he sees himself as, but also it brings him into conflict in the plot to a mid-level crime boss, someone who works for a crime boss and is in the process of trying to usurp the position of his boss. And so, putting that plot aside, looking at what the mask can do in the film, we have several parts here where I see that what Luffy has become as the sun god Nika is really the mask, hence my intro. And I want to go over a few of those here, because they're just like one-to-one. And so right off the bat, we had, alright, I'll pull it up. Right off the bat, there's the confidence level. Luffy has always been a pretty confident guy in his abilities. He spent a very long time training to master the Gomu Gomu no Mi, but once he becomes Nika, he just seems to fly in the face of danger. And especially given his opponent right now, that was being seen a little ridiculous. Ridiculous. So he should not be doing it now. He needs to keep his composure and finishes off. But he has totally went overboard in confidence, and he's to the point he's just lounging around on top of Onigashima, facing off against Kaido in the dragon form recently. And right away, the mask is that and more. And this is one of the areas where the mask is unequivocally more. He is totally confident in every situation, and whether or not it's the mask, whether or not Stanley Ipkiss or the mask, because there does seem to be a duality here, which I'm also seeing with Luffy. Stanley Ipkiss as the mask seems to always have a way to get out of every situation, never loses his composure. This is in the context of the film. That's a lot of there's a contrast there to Stanley, where he's quite kind of shy and lacks a lot of confidence to himself, and wants to be this kind of leading man, and just has never been able to do it. Next, the unorthodox ways of handling situations. Luffy has always been a kind of a brawler, sort of in combat, but given the type of devil fruit he has now, or has always had, he had gained an enormous amount of flexibility in battle and ways of handling his foes, compared to someone like his pals Zoro or Sanji, who just fight in their own styles. A swordsman with 3 swords with katanas, or Sanji using a type of, I don't know, would that be like a martial art where he uses his legs exclusively. But Luffy likes to use his fists and likes to go head first into a fight, but his fruit gave him enormous amounts of techniques to handle situations and allow the fight to most fights do not end in the similar way, given how Luffy was able to adapt. Likewise with the mask, in the case of the mask, Stanley Ipkiss is not a fighter. He's not someone who seemed to be probably someone who was bullied as a kid, and he just never tried to solve things with his fists. The film's a comedy, so it's not leading into being an action film. There is one point where he has to go up against his antagonist without the powers of the mask, so he has to fight back, and he does a pretty good job actually, given that he's not a true challenge to his foe. But when he changes with the mask, he becomes a very creative person who approaches situations with mostly a cartoon kind of solutions. One of the first things he does is he's attacked by his landlord, who thinks he's some kind of prowler or intruder. And because she's gonna shoot him, he does something that's also a jumping, a thing that's similar to Luffy did initially, where he leaps away from damage to escape. Luffy doesn't. In the case of Luffy, the first time he does something that I thought was similar. Maybe not. He's swallowed by Kaido, and he bounces around inside Kaido to perhaps escape or just cause damage. But more importantly, even more interesting later, when he's attacked, he bounces back up, and he starts jumping around like I'm not saying ping pong, but he leaps back from an attack to go after Kaido. Again, when Luffy does these attacks, he's trying to go back after Kaido and actually get into the fray, where the mask usually is trying to escape with some of these movements. So jumping, there's a few instances where the mask ping pongs around or bounces around, which was seen very similar there. Next, there's some instances too where the mask using more cartoon physics more than the Gumu Gumu, less than what the Gumu Gumu does. He stretches his arms out. Like one time he grabs his hat, and one that was actually very similar, very one-to-one. Recently in the last chapter, Luffy is where do I have that? Yeah, I can't find it here, but Luffy, Kaido swings his Kanabo at Luffy, uses a wind scythe kind of attack, I recall, or do I have it? Do I have it? I guess I don't have it. And in order to avoid the attack, Luffy grabs himself near the crotch, pulls his whole torso up, and avoids the attack. 1-to-1. At one point in the mask is shot at by Dorian, the antagonist, and he does the exact same thing. I do know there's some cartoon versions of this somewhere. Maybe be able to find them later, but right there, I just could not help but think of that. And it's just a funny way to approach situations in a fight, especially when Luffy's going up against Kaido, and this is like, he's no longer just merely trying to dodge attacks and go back at Kaido and he is, but he's just doing these cartoony things. Oh, eyes. Big one, eyes. Luffy's eyes. The eye thing has always been something that Oda has done a lot in his manga. There was a big image, the famous image of Usopp and I can't think of her name. The one who had that devil fruit power at Doflamingo's, one of his subordinates or his lieutenants, I should say, who had control over everyone using the toy power. There's an image with the Usopp and the Usopp thing he created to stop her, and they had the big bulging eyes. Also very prevalent in cartoons, and there's one instance in the movie here that is done by the mask, and that's in this case. By the way, another part of the subplot of the mask is his romantic interest in a singer who is working for the club that Dorian is part of, and he goes to the club as the mask has his eyes popping out, just like that. In the case of One Piece, we have here Luffy is, when he's in his giant form, he's smacked by Kaido with a Kanabo, and he falls down into the ceiling of the top floor where Law, Kid, Nami, Tama, I forget there was one more, and they all see his eyes popping out, and it's done in a different way than any similar exact way I've seen in the movies or elsewhere, but it's just very cartoony, and it's just great to me. And the mask has a few different versions in this film, where the first one was like his eyes popping out just exactly normal but still connected to his socket. The second is the one that Oda's used a lot of, similar version. And the third is one where his skull actually pops out of his head and when he's ambushed by the cops. But this also connects nicely to a very important one that I know everyone is talking about, and I think is what's going on. Luffy, as a now awakened zone user, but also having these powers where it seems similar to paramecia, I think is affecting things around him, turning things into rubber, which we see where he's bouncing up and down the ground like it's a trampoline. Where Luffy here drops into the ceiling and the others have their eyes pop out, I truly think that is a side effect of his powers of influencing things around him, and that this is this is going to give him some almost broken amount of power in the future, but something that is just, I think is just silly now, and but I think it's a good clue to think about these things and how they could be useful later. I'm going to get back to that. But in the mask, back to my comparison, the mask definitely has powers to do all sorts of those effects on people around him. He has some power to persuade people to kind of do his will to some degree. I wouldn't say he's really fully hypnotizing them. At the point where he's ambushed by the cops, he does the Cuban Pete song by Desi Arnaz, and he gets all the SWAT and cops to do the little line dance. I can't think of the name of that either now. And he gets them all to dance and lose their composure and what they were there to do. And earlier in the film, he takes the band members of this club and he completely changes out their clothes. He just spins the one guy around, and suddenly the guy's decked out in dark clothing, right? And I was just pulling up the clip here. Yeah, 1 second the guy is wearing white, and now he's decked out in dark clothing with a hat, the nice felt hat, all of them are. You don't even see the other ones change out. He just spins one guy, and then they're all suddenly, right? They're all suddenly, all from white into dark. So clearly he has an impact on things around him. So there are clearly some other things here now that are not quite one-to-one. For example, the mask is nigh invincible from what we've seen. He falls. Well, he does. Another one is he falls down from several stories of his apartment, flat on onto the pavement of a street, and he is perfectly fine. And Luffy did have something similar where he's struck on his head by a Kaido's Kanabo and is able to recoil from that. But there's multiple instances, especially in 1045, where he is clearly being damaged and he's clearly still at the end of his rope. So he is not invincible like the mask. Another thing is the mask does manifest more, like has the hammer space thing where objects just come out of nowhere and just pull out of his pocket, or the time he turns a balloon into a Tommy gun to scare off these hoodlums, no, not really hoodlums, that come after him. And so putting this together, though, there's a clear similarity there that I thought is probable that Oda saw this film, because it's also a very popular comedy thing, one of Jim Carrey's roles that really got him into popularity. And I wouldn't be surprised if he saw it and it was inspired by this, as well as the cartoons, old cartoons. But now I want to change over to something important with the similarity, and it's important with Luffy and the plot, where I think, much like Stanley Ipkiss and even Dorian, who wears the mask later on, and actually and Stanley's dog Milo, the mask has a personality change to whoever wears it. And the Luffy here does seem to have this personality change going on, which I'm saying a similarity. But I want to just flip over to how dangerous this could be for Luffy's sake and compared to the mask. And in the mask, he is able to take it off, or it's also the origin of the mask, as it's stated in here, is created by a Loki, the god of mischief from Norse mythology, and it only works at night. So, Stanley can take the mask off when he feels he really has to. Initially, I think he's just letting the power go to his head, but he pulls it off later on after he escapes from the police officers. Anyways, Luffy had a big personality change here. He's really getting involved into this fight. Before this, he's always been very serious about fighting. Oh, not always. In his first chapter, he seems to be having a good time when he first meets. I'm just having so many names forget here. Kobe. He beats Kobe. He goes up against what's her name, and he's having a jolly old time. He's pretty carefree in the beginning. Luffy was. That seems to have come back here, but I think this has more to do with the devil fruit than him. He knows what the stakes are here. He knows he has to defeat Kaido. He knows who all these people have suffered because of Kaido. But now he's just bouncing around, having a good time. He's doing silly things to escape from Kaido, which are very creative and probably very useful to defeat someone like Kaido, who just is like tenfold version of what Luffy wants to be. Luffy usually is this kind of brawler, but I'm concerned this is gonna have an effect on Luffy later, where he's not gonna take other fights seriously. But the last chapter had a break where he lost his power, so I'm hoping, and he had this great speech about who he has to fight for, but I'm a little concerned still that this will be a danger if he doesn't gain some better control over this. And I hope he's got time to do that, because he spent a lot of time with the fruit and in its unawakened form. He spent years as a kid with it, spent a couple years now with Rayleigh. So he's gotten better with that, but it never really caused him a personality change. He didn't know it was a zone. And we know that zones, like carnivorous zones, have problems with the fruit and how the powers and how it can affect them. Chopper made that very apparent and warned us with, like, Rob Lucci. But to change away from that bit of that worry, I'm also very happy that Luffy, that Oda, I should say, brought this kind of power into play, because as broken as it looks, we've had other broken devil fruits too, by the way. We have Raizo's fruit, which can store things to a capacity we're unaware of, like gallons of water, hundreds, maybe thousands of gallons of water into its fruit. And there's that guy, Foxy, with the fruit that can freeze things. There's just so many little fruits that the Big Mom's kids that can fuse together into one being. There's a lot of fruits here that seem rather broken in the right context, that are too broken, and Luffy seems to take the cake. But I want to cite how, as broken as this seems, I think this is almost the perfect fruit to have, I hope, contrasting with Blackbeard and his fruit that can negate other powers. I really want to see this fight. This is the fight. I'm really looking forward to this now, because up until this point I had no idea how Luffy would be able to handle someone like Blackbeard. Even with Armored Haki and Conqueror's Haki, I could not see how Luffy was going to handle fighting Blackbeard, especially since he's got other fruit powers. Now, at least one other that we know of, Voidbeards. But with this kind of power, I just don't know if Blackbeard can negate it as he can others. It seems too outlandish. It seems out there, and something that may make the playing field far more even. So everyone worried about how broken and silly this is, I think it only is going to be when he uses the power. It only is surrounding him a short sphere. Maybe he can make it further, and people won't get. Maybe people who are within his bubble cannot get hurt the same way they would if they were no more people in the One Piece world. Then they can get the bullets. Maybe they all become rubber people, and he can have people around him gain defensive abilities with him being nearby him. I see all kinds of positives out of this that can help make future fights better. And so I am not concerned about how OP it looks, because Oda's clearly trying to rein it in a little bit, showing that he can get damaged. But when it comes to Blackbeard, I think Blackbeard's fruit was probably one that was almost too OP. And given that we don't know much about what Blackbeard is like as a person, and that Marco made a statement way back about how his body's weird, having something else that's weird in this context really seems to me, though, even out the playing field. So that about covers what I got for today. Thanks.